$600. That is how much I signed my very first client for. And the moment that I signed them, I immediately quit my 9 to 6 job, which to some may seem absolutely nuts. I mean, even looking back now, I'm like, that was pretty crazy that I did that. But there is something to be said for having very naive trust and faith in yourself. So, see, when I landed that client, I was like, if I can land a client for $600, literally the world is my oyster. I know that then I can land a client for $2,000. I know that I can replace my 9 to 6 income. I know that I can surpass my 9 to 6 income. I didn't technically have any hard proof that I could do those things, but that one small kind of hurdle of landing the very first client, I was like, I can keep doing this. Like, I have found a way to land a client who will pay me to manage their social media. And not only that, I'm not going to be working full time for them. Like, this is crazy. I can do this so many more times. Like, I can duplicate this. And I'll tell you what's really interesting is I do believe that when you're kind of backed into a corner, amazing things happen. Now, do not get me wrong. I am not telling you to go land a $600 client and quit your job. I am not telling you that. I'm telling you to eliminate all other options. And in order to eliminate all other options, you have to put on blinders. And so that's what I did. I did it in a very dramatic way, but it's also very important to note that I was 24. How old was I? I was 25 years old. And I had a very low barrier of responsibilities. I didn't have any pets to take care of. I didn't have any children to take care of. I had myself to take care of. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this in the most dramatic way that I possibly can. And I'm going to prove to myself, I'm going to prove to my husband, but fiance at the time, that I can make this happen. And it's either like a now or never thing. It's also important to note that I had spent a solid year and a half trying to get this off the ground. This wasn't just I'm going to decide to do this. I'm going to land this client. And then all of a sudden I quit my job. This was a year and a half of trial and error and trying to figure out what I needed to say to get people to actually want to hire me. It's also important to note that this was, my beginning phase of this started in the end of 2016. So the end of 2016, I was like, okay, I really want to leave corporate America. 2017 was when I really started trying to figure out what I could do. I tried a lot of different things. And then by the mid 2018 is when I landed that first client. Because I heard 100 no's. Literally 100 people were like, nah, we don't hire freelancers. No, we need people in office. I had that going against me. You don't have that going against you anymore. Hiring freelancers, hiring people remotely is such a common thing now. I was really, really going upstream at that point. And so I landed this first client and I was like, amazing. And then not a lot of people know this, but I landed another client, and that client was around $700 a month. And I actually drove to Michigan to meet with them in person. I was living in Ohio at the time. So I drove about 3 hours to meet with them in person, talk through everything. We actually, I printed out my proposal. We went through all of that in person, and then they hired me. And so I was like, okay, I got the 600. I quit my job. I got another one that was 700. And I was like, okay, I'm sitting at 1,300. And this all happened in the span of a couple days. And then I go, okay, if I can get one more client, at more, just a little bit more, I can replace my old income. And that can all happen in a couple weeks at this point. So I went on Indeed, and Indeed also did not have a lot of, freelance and remote jobs just wasn't a thing, right? So I went on Indeed, and there was somebody who was looking for a social media marketing manager, and it actually said a freelance position. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It was such a good starting, it was such a good amount each month that they were willing to pay that I actually legitimately thought it was fake. And it was really funny because so I had the phone interview We just had a phone interview, and I could tell it was a real person. I was like, okay, this is a real person, but I couldn't tell like how legit of a actual role it was. And they were wanting to pay $2,000 a month, and once again, it was not full time. And I was like, okay, if I get this, like I'll be sitting in a really good spot in month one. Right at that point, I'm sitting at like 33. It was either like $3,300 or $3,500 a month, and I remember I went from literally making nothing in this to then all of a sudden this was happening in the span of, I want to say this was literally like a 3 week span. And so I have the phone interview, and it's important to note that I had encountered a couple like spam like jobs previously. And so I was very timid, and I straight up said, on your job posting, you said this was $2,000 a month for X amount of hours. That there was a little bit of travel, and the travel was essentially like 45 minutes away from like where I lived in Ohio. So it wasn't anything crazy, and it was like to go on site where the client was to shoot content. And I was like, is this actually like legitimate? Like, are you are you a real company? Can you send me your website? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. It was really funny because I don't remember like all of the parts of the interview, but I do remember after I landed that position, the the guy who hired me was like, he said, he was like, part of the reason why I hired you was because like you were so blunt and you were so upfront, and you basically were like, are all of these things accurate? And I was like, well, yeah, because I didn't want to waste your time or my time, and my time had already, I was already a year and a half into this, right? Like I had money to make. And so I literally went from 0 to 3,500, give or take, in 3 weeks. And I was like, okay, this is something. Like this is something. I think at my 9 to 6 before this, so like my job scope was so weird. I worked at Carter's Baby Clothing in their corporate office in Atlanta. I worked there for 2 years, and then I really wanted to move back to Ohio. I spent most of my like childhood in Columbus, Ohio, and I wanted to move back. The last like year of me living in Atlanta, I actually started dating my now husband, and he lived in Columbus. And so we were like trying to figure out how I could get back there. I, had this like fashion experience. I was applying to a lot of like the corporate, there's so many corporate companies there. I was applying to so many. I actually made it through like a lot of interviews with one company, and then it went completely under. And I was like, ooh, that's a bummer. And then I, I applied for like Abercrombie, all of those, all those companies. And like nothing was really kind of like happening. Like I would get a couple interviews, and then they would just like not go any further. And I was like, okay, this is not like, I need to take this into my own hands, right? Even though I'm like applying for so many jobs every single day. Even though I was applying, like nothing was happening. And I had a timeline in my mind of when I wanted to get back to Ohio. It's also important to note, especially in, I think I moved back to Ohio in 2017 is when I moved back there. And it's important to note that the cost of living in Columbus compared to Atlanta, especially in 2017, was wildly different. And so I was willing to take a pay cut to move back there because I knew I was going to be happier. I really was getting to the point where like I wasn't happy in Atlanta anymore, and I wanted to be back in Columbus. My parents also lived in Michigan at that point. So I would go from being like literally a plane ride away from them to them being a 3-hour drive, which was so much better. Long story short, I quit my job at Carter's, put in my 2 weeks, packed up everything. One of my best friends and I literally I drove a U-Haul. We could not get my car to hook up to the U-Haul, and she drove my car, and we drove from Atlanta to Columbus. I had no real job. My now husband, boyfriend at the time, was like, just come up here. He like owned his own townhome and was like, just come up here. We'll figure it out. Like you'll get something when you're here. And I was like, okay. So I went up there. I got this like freelance contractor, like golf sales job where I literally would go to golf tournaments, and they would have like special things that were happening at each of these holes. And so my job was essentially to like get as many people to sign up for this like special thing at each hole or at the hole that I was managing. It was awful. I talk about being like objectified to the 20th degree. They were always in really random places, and the company that I actually like was working for was awful. That all could be like a whole nother thing, but I think it really taught me a lot on the sales front because I was just like, that's what I had to do, right? I had a base pay, but then if I could hit certain numbers, then I would get bonuses. And so I did that. I did that for not a super long time. I think I did that for a couple months, and it was always on the weekends. So like during the week, I had a pretty open schedule, and during the weekend, I was going to these tournaments, and it really sucked because obviously that was the opposite of my husband's work schedule, and so we weren't like ever seeing each other. And I also just did not like it in the slightest. And I was like, okay, I kept applying for jobs. I got a marketing job at a desk company. It was awful. I was making such a small amount of money, but I was like, okay, at least I got my foot in the door when it comes to marketing, right? Like I got there. I was there for like I wasn't even there for a year. I was there for like maybe 8 months, and I was like, I have to get out of this. First of all, they had like nothing for me to do. I was begging for work. I was like counting down the hours. I was like, these days are going so slow, and I actually was spending a lot of my time because I was begging for them to give me work, and they didn't have anything. I was spending a lot of my time building my blog, trying to get some like brand deals, and trying to build my own social media business because I was like, okay, the way I viewed it, especially at that period, in the internet phase, is I was like, if I can show that I can build my own like presence, that's a case study. And then I can go to other people and be like, see, I can actually do this, because I didn't really have that experience. And so I started doing that actually when I was in Atlanta. And so I just kept like ramping that up. And so I'm really thankful, like, even though I was bored out of my mind at that job, like I had a lot of time to build like my own case study, which was great. And so when all of that was happening, I ended up getting another job at a eye company, like a eye company, an eye doctor's office, and they wanted a social media manager. And I did a little bit of social media management, but it mostly was just like sitting in their storefront and if people came in, like answering questions. And so once again, I was begging for more work. I was like, can I do more? They had like 3 or 4 offices, and I was like, can I actually run your marketing for all of these offices? And it just wasn't going anywhere. And I feel like that was kind of like a very common thing with social media around that time, was people didn't like really understand or grasp how powerful it could be for your business. And so while I was being hired to do these social media management jobs, like I was bored out of my mind. And it also is when my brain started going, even if I was doing a full social media, like, scope for these companies, I would still have a lot of time on my hands. I need to try and figure out how to find clients, and like that I will make more money, my time will go further, and I'll actually be doing something that like I enjoy, and I'm not just like being stuck at a desk. And so because I was a little bit all over the place with those jobs, that when I was at the eye doctor company, I should figure out a better way to say that. I wasn't making that much money. I think I was making I genuinely, I don't remember what my salary was, but I know that I had taken like, I think I was making around like 40K a year. And so I was like, okay, I can replace this through freelance. I know I can. So then when you fast forward to landing those 3 clients and having $3,500 a month, and it's not taking up all my time, and I can still bring on more clients, I was like, this is a gold mine. And that is why I quit my job. I actually quit that job literally. And my last day was the week before my bachelorette party. So that was in May. I'll always remember that. And then we got married in August. And it was so funny. Like I had so May was a crazy month where I quit my job. I had the 1 client lined up, and then I ended up signing the 2 clients like right after my bachelorette. So like all of that kind of happened then. And then my husband and I got married in August, and we went on a honeymoon. We were gone for like 3 weeks. It was amazing. And it just was such a wild time. But looking back, like I had been trying to build this for a long time. Like when I finally went out on my own, so many people were like, okay, well, you got lucky. And I'm like, I didn't get lucky. I figured out what the roadmap and what the formula was, and then I rinsed and repeated that. And so I went from having a $600 a month client, and that's all I had, to then, as a team of one, I was making $7,000 a month. Like, I had a lot of clients at one point. I was exhausted, but I was making it happen. And I think that that's the part, is like, why so many of our students are going faster than I personally ever did, was like, they're not having to go through all of that trial, right? Like, I had years of trial and error to get to that point, and they get to just follow the roadmap that it took me a year and a half, 2 years to build that roadmap. They get to just follow that now. And so now they're landing higher paying jobs, they're landing higher paying clients. And also, once again, what I keep saying, and I wish that people understood this more, is like, you have so much on your side now. People, like, hiring somebody remote is not strange. Hiring a contractor is not strange. Like, those are very normal things, and people expect to pay more. And so you have so many amazing things on your side. The one thing that's holding you back personally, like, let's be real for a second, the one thing that's holding you back is that, like, you haven't put enough weight on it. You haven't put in, the stakes aren't high enough. I'm not saying to go quit your job. I'm not saying to go flip your life upside down. I'm saying that you need to personally put yourself in a corner and be like, okay, I'm cutting out all other options. Like, this has to work. And when you make a decision of like, this has to work, I don't have any other options, you will be amazed at what actually happens. And it's not because all of a sudden you're in this like survival mode of like panic, but it's because you become laser focused on what your end goal is. I know this is a long video, but I just want you to understand that the only thing that's standing in your way of actually getting that dream life, of actually being able to quit your job, of actually being able to replace your income, being able to stay home with your kids and make money, is you. You're the only thing. You can join the Pinterest VA school and follow that path. You can also join the Pinterest VA school and never take action. You are the common denominator there. And sometimes we need to like become very, very real with ourselves and be like, why do I actually want to do this? Why do I actually want to enter this space? Are the stakes high enough for me personally? At that time, my stakes were really high. I knew I had to make money and I had to land clients, or like, I was up a creek with no paddle kind of a situation. And like, sometimes you just have to be in those positions in order to actually see something happen. So I'm not saying go quit your job by any means. I'm just saying kill off all other options. Make the decision that this is what you're going to do. Stay laser focused for 6 months, like your livelihood depends on it. Because listen, if your goal is to be able to stay home with your kids, and like, I'm sitting here right now 27 weeks pregnant, and I'm like, okay, if I had 13 weeks before I knew I was going to be having a child, like, that is my timeline, that is my runway, that is me condensing, and that is me putting myself in a pressure cooker. And I know that I have to make something happen before the baby is here, so that then I can stay home, right? Like, you need to give yourself that type of pressure cooker situation, and everyone's is going to look different. Every situation is going to look different, but I'm telling you that until you literally make the decision, and to decide means to kill off all other options. So that means like, you decide you're going to become a Pinterest manager, you stop Googling ways to make money from home. You stop going down TikTok rabbit holes of like how to become an Amazon affiliate. You literally join the Pinterest VA school, you go through the content, and you take action. And you put your blinders on. And then you look up 3 months from now, you look up 6 months from now, and all of a sudden you have a business that is making way more than you ever did in your 9 to 6. And you go, wow, this actually worked. And it's simply because of you. You are the common denominator. Because like I said, on the flip side, you can also join the program and you can take zero action, and then you can say, this didn't work. You're the common denominator there. So I hope, as we are entering, we're in March, this is crazy. We're in March, we're almost 3 months into the year. I hope that you're finally becoming really serious about what you want the rest of your year to look like, and you're ready to take action. You're ready to take those steps, because at the end of the day, I can sit here and I can preach and I can get on my soapboxes, but until you make the decision to actually change your circumstances, to actually take action, like until you make that decision, all this is going to be is just like information coming in and going out. So if you're ready to jump over the line, two things I would tell you. One, if you haven't watched the free training, watch the free training. There's so much information in there. It's a brand new one that I recorded this year. Not to toot my own horn, it's good. There's so much content in there. If you have watched the free training, join the Pinterest VA School. Jump inside. It is your lowest barrier to entry. We dropped the price of the program this year because I want to help as many women as possible get inside of this program, and I know it needs to be accessible. So that is where I would start. Those two simple things. Let me know in the comments, let me know in DMs if any part of this you're resonating with, and let me know if you're actually deciding to kill off all other options and enter into your dream life this year, because I want to cheer you on.